The year is 1928. In a little town called Latrobe, Pennsylvania, a baby is born. Over the next 75 years, this person would go on to change countless lives and cement himself in the minds of children and adults alike. Whether he was helping teach young kids on the TV, preaching in a church, giving to charity, or causing strangers to break out in song on the subway, this man is the epitome of good. His name was Fred Rogers, host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Now you see, Fred built his life on love, helping others, and spreading joy. Everything he did showed the amount of love the man carried in his heart. From music, to teaching, to the care he showed his wife, he led every day by example. Now you may be asking, Professor Six, Mr. Rogers is the best, but what does he have to do with the Fallout universe? Well, my irradiated pupil, I'll tell you. A few videos ago, I made a tier list ranking the factions with the worst morals in the wasteland, but today we're going to do the opposite. In all things, not just gaming related, I hold Mr. Rogers as the foundation of how good someone can be. He gives us an example of what true good morality is, and he makes it hard to say that his morality is subjective. So today, I have 7 factions that will be ranked to determine who is the best, held to objective moral standards. If you can't tell, I love talking about the guy. He's kind of my anti-John Lennon. And there's one piece of information from his story that I feel will really show the inspiration behind a lot of these factions. Located in Fred Rogers' alma mater, Rollins College, is an engraving that he used to power all of his aspirations. And that engraving says, "Life is for service." Now in the first video in this series I had the Raider scale. It was a scale starting at 1 and ending at 10 that helped dictate the placement of the factions based on 4 subcategories. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today I present to you the Six's Mr. Rogers scale. Here's how it works. There are 4 subcategories that will help determine the placement of each faction covered today. Each subcategory is ranked 1 to 10 and the overall amount out of 40 will determine where they are ranked on the scale. The first category is acceptance, meaning who they are willing to accept and let join their ranks or help. The more open they are, the higher they're ranked. Next is charity. Pretty straightforward, the more they give, the higher they rank. After that is saving. What acts do they perform to help the dwellers of the wasteland? Last is unwarranted death. Killing is an unfortunate necessity of the wasteland, but doing so out of survival is different from, doing so just for and gigs. Due to this, unwarranted death will start out at 10 and go down the more they kill unwarrantedly. Now keep in mind, all of this is my opinion. There are bound to be things you disagree with me on, and that's completely okay. We can discuss in the comments, but let's just keep them friendly, alright? No need to call other commenters names or anything. At the end of the day, we're all here because we enjoy Fallout. Okay, I've yapped enough. Let's get started with our first faction. This was my most requested faction from the first video, so I decided to start with it. In the 23rd century, a group of volunteer militia members started the Commonwealth Minutemen. They based their group off of the Revolutionary era Minutemen pledging to defend Wastelanders at a minute's notice. They first rose to prominence in 2180 after defending Diamond City from a super mutant attack. As they grew, they began the creation of the Commonwealth Provisional Government, a unifying democracy backed by a constitution. However, after the Institute sent an envoy to the meetings, the CPG was massacred and talks of further unity died. Soon after, the Minutemen formed their headquarters in Fort Independence, south of Boston, now known as the Castle. Later on, a Mirelurk Queen would attack the castle, causing the Minutemen to flee and their armory to be lost. Led by their general, Joe Becker, the Minutemen continued to help the Commonwealth. After Becker's death, however, we see a fracture in the group, causing the downfall of the Minutemen. This is around the time the Quincy Massacre occurred, which I talked about more in the first video in this series. Due to a betrayal, the Gunners, a militia group in the Commonwealth, attacked the township of Quincy. Most were either kidnapped or killed, but a small group escaped with the help of Preston Garvey. They were pursued through Boston, eventually having their numbers cut down to only 5. This is when the sole survivor finds them, and the rest of their story is up to the player. Starting with acceptance, the Minutemen have no qualms with anyone as long as they are not inherently evil. We see them accept ghouls for the most part, being relatively accepting of the Vault-Tec salesman if you send them to one of their settlements. Synths are a mixed bag. For the most part, they're accepting, if not a little uneasy. You can get the occasional comments like, "I hope you're not one of those synths here to spy on me," but Preston Garvin can be quoted calling the railroad's fight a noble cause. Their perspective on synths is that they're still people that need help, but the stigma around them makes them a little more cautious. Super mutants are a little tougher. They fought against them for years, had comrades die by their hands, but if you bring Preston Garvey to Strong, he treats them like a regular person, if only a little put off by some of Strong's comments. All in all, they look at the content of their character, not the race on top. For this, I give the Minutemen a 10 out of 10 in acceptance. The main thing the Minutemen care about is protection. Their focus is on the safety of settlers, but every now and then we do see a quest that has you building infrastructure. You're asked to help settlements build basic needs such as food, water, and shelter. Although not heavily emphasized to the player, it can be generally implied that the Minutemen value the livelihood of wastelanders past just keeping them alive in combat. This nets the Minutemen their second 10 in charity. Saving settlers is the Minutemen's bread and butter. They formed to unify the Commonwealth and save everyone they could. The biggest meme from the entire game is another settlement needs your help, which, yes, gets annoying as f sometimes, but is still a huge insight into the Minutemen's beliefs. You see them rise to power because they saved Diamond City. You see them get wiped out because they want to save Quincy. You see them potentially destroy the Institute because they want to save the entire Commonwealth. They put their entire lives on the line for the people of the Commonwealth, netting them their third 10. Now this one might ruffle some feathers. In most cases, the killing done by the Minutemen is in defense, not offense. From the raider gangs to the supermutants, they are done because settlements are already provoked and their livelihoods are in danger. Even in the Nuka Roll DLC, Preston urges you to kill the raider gangs because they are actively infecting the Commonwealth and enslaving people. Then comes the mission With Our Powers Combined. This mission has caused many conflicts among fans of Fallout 4, some believing it was justified, others saying it was not. Basically, after destroying the Institute, you are tasked with building artillery cannons in a few settlements to fire at the Pridwin, the Brotherhood's blimp and forward operating base. The artillery fires and the Pridwin is destroyed, and after defeating the remaining Brotherhood patrols attacking the castle, the Minutemen reacquisition the Brotherhood's vertibirds. The justification for this comes from the requirement to start this quest. The sole survivor has to manage to get the Brotherhood to be hostile with them. At this point, the idea behind it is us or them, preferably them. My issue with this is that the Pridwin currently houses 6 children on board. Whether the children are being indoctrinated or not is besides the point. As stated in another video, squires have the chance to leave the Brotherhood before they become initiates. The Minutemen kill 6 children. Something that I feel heavily goes against what they stand for. Now I know there will be debate about this, and personally I think it's still warranted, even though I love the Brotherhood. God, that statement won't hold up in court. However, objectively speaking, this is an evil action. There's debate about if they knew the kids were up there, and that leads us to some critical thinking. Most likely, the survivor has been on the Pridwin prior to this mission, meaning they would know about the squires. There are also Radiant missions you can do where you're tasked with taking the squires out on field missions. If the sole survivor does this, it can be assumed other high-ranking members of the Brotherhood do so too, even though we don't personally see it in-game. This is one very extreme case and isn't really comparable to anything else we see the Minutemen do, so for this, I'm only going to dock them 2 points, giving them an 8 out of 10 and unwarranted death. All in all, the Minutemen still score a 38 out of 40, putting them at a 9.5 on the Mr. Rogers scale. Very strong start. In the late 22nd century, a group of vault dwellers emerged in California, forming a tribe that would later become known as the Followers of the Apocalypse. They would originally take residence in Dayglow, or pre-war San Diego, before migrating to the Los Angeles ruins known as the Boneyard. They quickly found their calling upon this migration, as the Boneyard was in close proximity to the Glow, a radioactive hellhole in the ruins of the West Tech Research Facility. The Glow caused many residents of the Boneyard to become sick, urging the followers to begin the development and rediscovery of medical technology. They built a foundation on, quote, striving to share old forgotten knowledge and forming a community that rejects senseless killing for survival. They hope to form a society that stops simple violence and focuses on an existence free of war and poverty, an existence that shares knowledge, resources, and ideas freely. Over time, they would continue to grow, joining the NCR for a time and sending scholars on expeditions to learn more about the wasteland. However, as the NCR began their occupation in the Mojave, both interior tensions and tensions with the NCR arose. Eventually, a split occurred, cutting the followers' numbers down and leading to the formation of the Office of Science and Industry. The NCR allied with the OSI, and the followers lost all Republic support, leading to a smear campaign in the Mojave against the NCR. Despite all of the politics, the followers still upheld their beliefs of free knowledge and support to all who need it. Although not explicitly stated, it can be assumed that the followers are alright with just about anyone. They were allied with the NCR during the time of Fallout 2, and the NCR had super mutants such as Ganj in their ranks. With how incredibly smart and critically thinking they are, I don't think they would have any issue with helping super mutants as long as they aren't evil. As for ghouls, we see the followers treating them just like anyone else, a somewhat rare thing in the wasteland. In New Vegas, we see Beatrix Russell under the employ of the followers. She's a mercenary being paid by the followers to work security for Old Mormon Fort. If they're willing to hire a ghoul and treat her well in New Vegas, we can assume this happens elsewhere too. Much like the Minutemen, as long as you're not inherently evil, the followers of the Apocalypse will aid you, giving them a 10 in acceptance. Followers are the epitome of charity. They do not charge for medical aid, they do not charge for knowledge, they received all their funding from the NCR prior to the split. The only time we see them truly charging for medical supplies to my knowledge is in New Vegas when they are low on funding due to losing the NCR support. Even then, they are apprehensive to charge for it but do so out of necessity. We even see that although the difference in ideology was enough to cause a rift in the faction, the OSI also kept their beliefs of free aid and knowledge. Not only do they give supplies and aid, but they freely train others to also help settlements without the requirement that they join the faction, although most do anyways. They also do research on things such as solar power and curing things like PTSD. Followers are so incredibly charitable that they allocate resources to research new ways to be charitable, giving them a bonus point and landing them with an 11 out of 10. The saving aspect of this list is also heavily bound to the charity thing. Although they aren't going out to fight people like the Minutemen, they're saving every single person they can medically and intellectually. Half of the inhabitants of Freeside are patients of the Followers. They formed the first post-war education institution known as Angel's Boneyard Medical University and can even be convinced in aiding the NCR in the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. All life-saving actions in medicine and education. Followers receive another 10 in regards to saving others. I've spent a good amount of time scouring wikis, playing the games, and perusing through Reddit posts trying to find anything that the Followers have done in regards to unwarranted killing, and I'm finding next to nothing. The only half point I have is that Caesar, originally known as Edward Sallow, grew up in the Boneyard and became a member of the Followers. He was a linguist and an anthropologist, and he was sent to the Grand Canyon to learn the dialects of local tribes. On this trip, Edward found a collection of history books discussing Rome and Gaius Julius Caesar's empire. Due to what he believed to be a mistranslation, he and his group were captured by the Blackfoot tribe, but due to his intelligence, he was quickly released and made their war chief. Over time, he would grow the tribe and envelop other tribes into his ranks, forming the Legion as we know it. However, I am in no way going to count this towards the Followers as a whole. One defector does not warrant any shift in opinions on an entire organization. If anything, it simply gives us comparison of how good the Followers are. It's completely possible I missed something, so if you can think of anything, let me know in the comments, but I'm giving the Followers another 10 in unwarranted killing. I had a feeling the Followers would rank high on this list, landing them with a 41 out of 40 or a 10.2 on the Mr. Rogers scale. In the previous video, I ranked the Brotherhood of Steel as a whole, but I purposely left out Fallout 3's rendition of the East Coast chapter because I feel that they deserve to be ranked in a different light. Now, Lion's Brotherhood was better than other chapters, but they definitely still uphold Brotherhood ideals. First and foremost, their ranks worked on a sponsor system. For a Wastelander to join their ranks, they had to be sponsored and vouched for by a higher ranking member. This came with a few caveats though, the main one being that the person being sponsored absolutely could not be a non-human. Ghouls especially were targets of Lion's Brotherhood, viewed with a mixture of distrust and hostility and considered an unpredictable element of the Wasteland. A very small amount of tolerance was shown to non-feral ghouls as it was left up to the individual holding the weapon. To quote the Fallout wiki, Lion's Brotherhood has little tolerance for ghouls, occasionally shooting them, either mistaking them for supermutants or not caring enough about the differences. Supermutants aren't even a question. The chapter has been at war with them for decades and has a kill-on-sight mentality about them. Unfortunately, companion dialogue was not fleshed out enough for us to hear much about Fox in regards to the Brotherhood, but that's besides the point. All in all, Lion's Brotherhood scores a 4 out of 10 on acceptance. Maliciously killing people based on race and keeping their ranks closed is just a damn bad look. I feel like I've talked about Project Purity a million times by now, but the Brotherhood was the main fighting force behind the preservation of Project Purity and free clean water for all in the capital wasteland. They fought and protected it in its infancy, housed the scientists after the Enclave attacked it, and used Liberty Prime to take it back and destroy the Enclave in the process. They then allocated their resources to keep it going, refusing to sell it to others. Charity work gave tens of thousands free purified water at the cost of their own resources and their connection to the West Coast Brotherhood. It wouldn't be until Lion's death that we see the East Coast reconnect with the other factions and their resources recover from the absolute drain that the project caused them. They sacrificed blood, resources, and brotherhood to give people the essence of life itself, and I can guarantee you Aquapura also landed in the hands of non-humans whether the Brotherhood wanted it to or not. All in all, I give Lion's Brotherhood a 10 in charity. I'm tired of talking about it, but the destruction of the Enclave saved the entirety of the capital wasteland from death. The Enclave wants to eradicate all who are not in their ranks and plan to use Project Purity to help take care of their own forces. They also aided the creation of Megaton with security. All of the settlers of Megaton owed their safety to the efforts of the Brotherhood. However, as previously stated, Lion's Brotherhood kills ghouls at will. We have no clue how many they've killed, but it's enough to be known by all ghouls in the capital waste not to go near them. All in all, I give Lion's Brotherhood an 8 out of 10 in terms of saving. Look, the whole racist killing thing is really impacting their scores. Non-feral ghouls are genuinely scared to come up above ground due to their presence, and one can be quoted saying they have the courtesy to miss, most of the time. Then comes the point I know some folks will have an issue with, the scourging of the pit. Prior to the Brotherhood's influence, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was a shithole ruled by murderers, cannibals, and rapists. It was generally understood to be avoided by all travelers. In 2255, the Brotherhood arrived, led by then Star Paladin Owen Lyons. Overnight, they slaughtered the entire city, taking 21 non-mutated children to join their ranks. All but one of these children would end up dying in battle. The pit eventually obtained power again and became just as bad, if not worse. The issue lies in the original scourging of the pit performed by the Brotherhood. Yes, the city was full of absolute evil, the worst kinds of people, but there's no possible way that every man, woman, and child was awful. The Brotherhood massacred an entire city, only saving a handful of children without a second thought. Think of the other children who weren't saved, the mothers who only cared that their kids were okay, the slaves and the victims that were just there against their will. All people who may not have been innocent but definitely did not deserve to be slaughtered. We see this a lot in Fallout. The deaths of the undeserving under the justification that they are with those who do deserve it, death by association. We do, however, see the Brotherhood kill for good too. The Enclave, Raiders, Super Mutants, all killed for the inhabitants of their shared territory. This was a difficult one to give points for, but in the end I ranked Lion's Brotherhood at a 4 in unwarranted death. It's always difficult to look at these points objectively instead of subjectively, so I don't think any ranking I could give this would sit right with me. Lion's Brotherhood is the best of some of the worst, and that shows in the back and forth of the points earned here. In the end, they scored 26 out of 40 overall, putting them at a 6.5 on the Mr. Rogers scale. Originally hailing from New Canaan, a Mormon community in Ogden, Utah, the New Canaanites suffered much strife. A few decades before 2281, the NCR made contact with them and established a healthy relation with them. They quickly learned that the New Canaanites were honest-to-God merchants and damn good fighters thanks to their mastery of the .45 auto pistol. Thanks to the growth of the NCR as well as the New Canaan trade routes, they eventually grew so strong that they became rivals of the Crimson Caravan Company. This would all end with the return of one man. As previously mentioned, Edward Sallow was once a follower of the Apocalypse, and on one fateful adventure out east, he was accompanied by a Mormon missionary who had knowledge of tribal languages. This man was Joshua Graham. Together they were captured, then released, taking control of the Blackfoot tribe and helping them win the war they were in with other warring tribes in the area. Sallow quickly became their war chief and Joshua Graham became a field commander, and when Sallow named himself Caesar, Graham was named Malpais Legate, second in command of the legion. Over 30 years, they would conquer tribes, taking control of most of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. The atrocities Graham committed under the Legion's banner caused his name to be feared far and wide. However, things changed for him when the First Battle of Hoover Dam occurred. 68 tribes attacked the dam led by the Legate, but Graham underestimated his enemy. His moves were predicted and his forces were caught in the trap, causing them to be blown up, with many high-ranking officials being killed following the chaos. The Legate retreated in disgrace, and in a demonstration that failure is not tolerated, he was covered in pitch and set on fire, being thrown into the Grand Canyon. Most would die to this, but this badass motherfucker lived, giving the hardest quote I have ever heard in my life.
I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me.
Now we see his return to New Canaan. To his surprise, the New Canaanites welcomed him back with open arms. However, his survival quickly got back to Caesar, causing him to send a group of his Frumentari to take him out. Under the command of a Frumentari named Ulysses, the city of New Canaan was razed, and in the end only 30 New Canaanites survived. Still being pursued by the Legion, the survivors made their way to Zion Canyon, and a rift between Graham and another leader, Daniel, caused them to split their forces. Graham wanted to slaughter the remaining pursuers, whereas Daniel wanted to evacuate. Here's where we find them in the game, now leading two tribes due to the fact that they brought the Legion to their door. The New Canaanites carry a huge amount of love for everyone in the wasteland as long as they don't try to cross them. It's thanks to their faith in God that they welcomed Joshua back home. They not only accepted trade with everyone, but they also sent missionaries out into the wastes to help and spread the word of the gospel, though we'll touch more on that later. Their support of everyone is what convinced the NCR that they were not religious fanatics like the cults that they dealt with back home. We don't know too much about their direct stances on non-humans, but it can be assumed that if they wanted to support everyone in the name of their religion, they would have no issue offering help to non-feral ghouls and intelligent supermutants. I give them a 10 in acceptance due to their deep passion for the religion they follow. This religion is also the driving force for their giving. Previously stated, they would send missionaries out into the surrounding land to lend aid and teach them about things such as weapon handling, medicine, and the big guy upstairs. We also see that Joshua Graham was an expert on tribal languages prior to meeting Edward Sallow, showing a history of cooperation between New Canaan and the tribals. If the tribes are willing to teach their language to an outsider, it hints at them receiving something impactful enough to warrant further communication. They prospered with their trade and shared that prosperity with the surrounding communities, all in the name of God. I give them a 10 out of 10 in charity as it reminds me of the Minutemen's charitable actions with a bit more religion behind it. Oh New Canaan, if only your saving of others could have saved yourselves. Look, the joke's not lost on me that those who enter the Protestant Christian religion are considered saved. Whether in an evangelist ideology or in a greater Protestant way, I feel like that point should be made, but it won't actually impact the rating that they get in this category. I just thought it was funny. Anyways, the biggest act of saving we see the New Canaanites perform is that of Joshua Graham himself. Homie crawled back home, his entire body covered in pitch burns, broken bones from being thrown into America's largest f***ing canyon, and they instantly welcomed him back and nursed him back to relative health. Keep in mind, at this time, Graham was still considered a legionary to them. It wasn't until after he was able to explain to them his situation that his title changed in their minds. Going back to the missionary work, the Mormon missionaries were trained in many things such as combat and medicine. Not only were these things used in tribes and other communities, but they were taught as well. The missionaries saved people with medicine and protection, but what they taught them allowed them to save themselves as well. We can see this in Zion, as the tribals are being taught everything that the New Canaanites know, especially how to operate a .45 auto pistol. We even see Daniel remaining in Zion due to the regret he has for endangering the tribes there. His penance is to save them from the wrath they brought to them. solid 10 out of 10 in saving. It's hard to quantify just how many people were saved by New Canaan, but the ideology behind it was pure and in their eyes, holy. We don't know a lot about New Canaan in regards to the combat they actually experienced other than the big ones. We do know that they were fighters, believing that they had the protection of God on their side. We know they helped friendly tribes survive against other warring factions, and we know that they didn't kill unless provoked. Joshua Graham's work in the Legion does not exemplify New Canaan, but you do see his remorse that he has for it all. His actions actively betrayed the teachings of New Canaan. Using this rubric, although the New Canaanites probably saw a good amount of death, it seems that it was warranted, and done in acts of protection as opposed to offensive action. This gives them their 4th 10, landing them at a 40 out of 40 or a perfect 10 on the Mr. Rogers scale. It's funny that the one Christian group on this list had a perfect score on the scale named after a Presbyterian minister. Now bear in mind, this topic is about New Canaan, the community that Joshua and Daniel hail from, not the tribes that they end up leading that we see in the Honest Hearts DLC. Sorry if this one was longer than the rest, it really just shows what my favorite New Vegas DLC is. Upon being pushed out of the strip by Mr. House, a leader of a tribe took control of Freeside. Before long, he would begin operating out of an old Elvis impersonation school, electing to call himself the King. They believed that the school was once a place of worship, as the building was full of pictures and holotapes glorifying the man we know as Elvis Presley, although they found no actual record of his name, mostly due to not being able to procure performance rights to his songs. They also found multiple outfits and hair gel in the building, giving their ranks a uniform to don. They built up Freeside hoping to, quote, make the best of a bad situation. They built the area on respect and personal freedom, saying every man is a king in their own right. They actually remind me of Good Neighbor from Fallout 4 in many ways, with a little more anarchy in the mix. Now for acceptance, there's really 2 answers to this. Who the kings tolerate in their territory and who they let join their ranks. We see them completely okay with ghouls and most travelers in Freeside, pushing the whole every man is a king narrative. To my knowledge, we don't see any ghoul kings though. Supermutants stay clear of Freeside and we don't have much information on them before the forming of the area, so we don't have a whole lot to go on there. They absolutely hate the NCR soldiers and citizens though, calling them squatters and starting an entire conflict with them, which we will talk about later. I will say, they seem to be focused on money and protecting Freeside with the limited resources they have, so my guess is they don't really give many f***s in terms of who they let in as long as they're willing to pay. I give them a solid 7 on acceptance, would be higher if we saw a larger selection of members in the core group and an openness to stopping their xenophobia. The Kings offer protection to Freeside. Due to hardware limitations, New Vegas is not portrayed in the way that Obsidian had in mind. The Strip and Freeside were intended to be much larger, with more land and many more NPCs in the area. Due to the limitations, I don't believe the Kings are portrayed as intended either. We're supposed to believe that they were spread pretty thin across Freeside, using the limited sources they have on hand to help, so that's the idea I'm going with. The problem is their personal freedom thing is very lax, meaning if someone wants to come in and start, they won't exactly stop them unless it impacts their personal business. Then we have the water faucet. There's only one functioning water faucet in Freeside by the time the courier gets there, and the Kings have a guard posted there charging every settler who uses it. The courier can help fix it, but the only man who can do it requires 100 caps to cure his chem addiction before doing so. This means that the Kings refuse to take a measly 100 caps from their funds to help the entirety of Freeside. They don't really give, they allow, at the expense of the settler. I give them a 1 out of 10 in terms of charity. The Kings have one thing going for them in regards to saving citizens, and it's their escort service. And no, not that kind of escort. Bodyguards. Posted at the gates leading into Freeside, the Kings offer contract bodyguards to help escort citizens through Freeside to safely enter New Vegas. They know the land and they know the people. If you need protection, they're probably your best bet. However, they are the de facto regime in Freeside. The simple fact that they need the bodyguards there in the first place displays just how hard they're bombing when it comes to keeping the peace in Freeside. Being stretched thin isn't a good enough reason to keep letting your territory be violent. Hire more security, make agreements with factions such as the Van Graffs, do something. They're good at being bodyguards, but refuse to take actions that will save the larger majority of Freeside, therefore I'm giving them a 4 in terms of saving. The Kings beat people up and intimidate, sure, but really only kill explicitly due to the NCR. Here's the sitch. NCR decides to offer aid to citizens of Freeside, offering things such as food and water and soup kitchens. Before the message can reach the King, however, his second-in-command Pacer intercepts it and beats the fucking shit out of its carrier. With funding being pulled for the program, the NCR can only offer aid to its citizens in Freeside, with them performing a citizenship test before entry into the soup kitchen. If you bring this information to the King, Pacer will quickly leave saying he has to, quote, take care of business. Before long, a King's member will tell everyone that a firefight has broken out at an old train station. Once you check it out, you see Pacer and a group of Kings have opened fire on the group of NCR soldiers at the soup kitchen. The best outcome is to make peace with the NCR, convincing them that the King was unaware of everything happening. Although apprehensive, the NCR agrees to stand down. If peace is made with the NCR, Pacer will later stage a coup and be killed by the King still loyal to the gang. Now ranking this one was hard, because although Pacer was one of them, he did not enact the will of the King himself. In fact, by the end of the quest, the King's organization does everything that Pacer refused to do. They end up making Freeside safer and more supplied for the people involved, but a few lives were lost in getting there. I'm gonna rate the Kings an 8 in unwarranted killing. If the King hadn't been so passive to Pacer's crazy side, lives would have been saved. The Kings get a 20 out of 40 or a 5 on the Mr. Rogers scale. I put them on here because I had a feeling they would rank a little lower, but the idea behind them seems to be somewhat admirable even if the execution is less so. These guys are just plain weird, but please don't tell Rad King I said that. He's pretty cool, you should check out his videos too. Beginning in Megaton, the Adamites helped with the construction of the city's walls. Their one condition was that they had to leave the nuclear bomb in the middle of the town untouched. Since the bomb seemed to be inert and the settlers desperately needed the Adamites' help, they agreed. They lived in a chapel and spent their days praying to the bomb. They believed that within every atomic mass was the creation of an entire universe. When it splits, that universe is released. They pray to Adam, their god, that continues to create infinite worlds through nuclear fission called the Division. They believe the Great War was a divine event, calling it the Great Division. They say that Adam was the one who caused the Great War, and that the nukes represent Adam's glow. Those who survived the bombs were called the lost children of Adam, and were deemed unworthy to be divided. This is why they pray. They ask to be worthy in the eyes of their god to be divided and join him in his next creation. By Fallout 4, they have spread throughout most of Northeast America. But are these guys really that bad, or just dang awkward? This may be the only faction on any list I ever make to treat ghouls with such a high regard. All but one faction we see treats ghouls as literal holy figures, with some directly worshipping them while others see them as followers who truly embraced Adam's glow. The one faction that does not approve of ghouls is the Nucleus sect and Fahaba, who believe ghouls to be unfit for Adam's grace. They allow just about anyone to join as long as they pass the imbibing test. They are asked to take the water of the glow gathered from sacred springs to identify those immune to radiation who are fit to serve Adam. They are also relatively welcoming to the sole survivor upon meeting them in Fallout 4. Simply from an acceptance perspective, they don't care who you are as long as you're strong enough to join their ranks. I'll give them a 9 out of 10. We do know that they have sent missionaries out in the past, hearing things like MacCready saying, "If you're here to preach about Adam." However, unlike the New Canaanites, these missionaries seem to be in the wasteland less to offer aid and more just to spread the word of Adam. I haven't been able to find much in regards to charity at all, and seeing as their end goal is to be divided by an atom bomb, I don't think that gift would be appreciated by most people in the wasteland. 1 out of 10 in charity. They don't really save people. We'll see more in unwarranted deaths that they do kind of the opposite. Their doctrine literally has the end goal of them dying, so I can't really use that as a good metric either. Their one saving grace is that they somehow give people radiation immunity. There are many theories as to how this happens, with two big ones. The first is the boring science answer that they somehow evolved to be resistant to radiation. The one I believe in is the fun one. Adam is actually real. More on that, the belief is that Adam is a Lovecraftian-style god, lowercase g, that the Adamites have pleased. We know that these gods, lowercase g, are real because of the experiences the player have had in places like Dunwich Building in Fallout 3 and the Dunwich Boars in Fallout 4. This ability literally wipes out the biggest natural threat in the wasteland and keeps followers alive for a ridiculously long time. They don't strive to save anyone other than themselves, but manage to do the impossible in doing so. I'll give them a 3 in saving solely due to the fact that the whole radiation immunity thing is just damn bananas. Here's the fun one. The children of Adam kill whoever they need to acquire their holy sites and maintain their sanctity. I'll rattle off a few. The last son of Adam, named Adam Whately, was a prophet of Adam that turned into a glowing ghoul giant. He tamed the Gigapede, a big centipede, and in 2286 attacked the Commonwealth. They are known to attack settlements near their holy sites, primarily the creator of Adam, to acquire supplies and spread the fear of Adam. They also go out of their way to attack Minutemen and Brotherhood if they get too close. Not to mention they intend on being divided. Should this one be done via nuclear detonation, thousands die. Simply put, they're a fanatical suicide cult akin to the likes of Jonestown. 1 out of 10 in unwarranted death. I'll be brutally honest with y'all, before writing this video, I did not know a lot about the Children of Adam. In the games, I usually just kill on sight and move on with my day. Upon learning more about these whack jobs, I'm realizing that my approach may have been justified. I'm not entirely sure why they were requested for this specific scale, but I had fun learning about them as I read. Keep in mind that there are multiple sects, some more dangerous than others, but for the sake of brevity, I'm keeping them all under one banner. They score 14 out of 40, landing them at a 3.5 out of 10 on the Mr. Rogers scale. Sorry, Rad King. Back to some actual good guys. The responders were a group of volunteer disaster relief personnel that formed shortly after the Great War. They were formed from the remnants of Appalachia's first responders, and they eventually grew to be a very large group in West Virginia. They set up numerous locations and focused on rebuilding society from the rubble. From fighting the first raiders to helping give aid and combat training to anyone who needed it, they ran an organization that really cared about those who lived after the aftermath of the war. However, they were not prepared enough to prevent the scorch plague from decimating Appalachia's population. They attempted to stop it, having worked on synthesizing a vaccine and developing a plague detector, but between helping people impacted by the war and fighting off the raiders, they were spread too thin and acted too late. As the plague began taking more settlements, communications went down, and with the fall of Morgantown, the responders were inevitably wiped out. The story would eventually be rediscovered with the return of the Wastelanders, and the fight would pick back up. The responders helped anyone who wouldn't kill them, and we can read about them even giving aid to raiders who were injured and left behind after their battles. They also took in anyone who wanted to help, actively finding them a place and training them to assist. In this regard, they saw the bigger picture. The only way society continues is if they save everyone they physically can. The responders get a 10 out of 10 in acceptance. The responders didn't charge for their services. They were true humanitarians. Medical aid, protection, training, food, water, it was all for free. 10 out of 10. They fought tooth and nail against the raiders, and as previously stated, they even helped save their enemies. They actively worked on creating a cure to the worst plague known to the wasteland, even if it was futile. They developed cures, they made alliances to strengthen numbers and supplies, they protected settlements from super mutants, raiders, and other monsters. They also created the Fire Breathers, an elite firefighting team that was eventually utilized to stop the Scourge. They saved everyone they could until they were physically incapable of saving anymore. I originally ranked them a 10 out of 10, but upon review, I just saw how similar they were to the followers in regards to charity, so I'm going to give them another bonus point, landing them at an 11 out of 10. I'll keep this one brief. They didn't kill unless provoked. The raiders from the north were a constant force looking to kill and pillage what they could, and the responders fought back valiantly. On top of that, during the Christmas flood of 2082, we see the responders actively attempt to not kill, instead capturing their enemy, hoping to trade them for a ceasefire. It sadly ended poorly, as the raiders believed those captured were dead, resulting in the blowing up of the Summersville Dam. Numerous innocents were killed. These are the type of people we're dealing with. People who would rather risk their lives to not end one and broker peace instead of slaughtering outright. With their third 10, the responders receive an exemplary 41 out of 40, awarding them a 10.2 on the Mr. Rogers scale. Truly a group that Fred Rogers would support. If you haven't seen the first video, I recommend watching that before this next segment so that the Raider rankings aren't spoiled for you. Here are the final rankings of the good factions that were placed today. I know I didn't cover a few, mainly the Railroad, but I have those set aside for the third video in this series, which I will be ranking soon. Now that we have the good factions ranked, I was going to place them on the scale with the bad factions to show a relatively full moral scale of the factions in the current Fallout games. However, as I did this, I realized one big flaw in my thought process. These scales are ranked on different things. I did not see a point in ranking factions like the followers on thievery or murder, as it can be assumed they don't do that. Therefore, although I have the full scale on screen, I don't feel it's an accurate representation of the factions put together. Do remember these factions are ranked on the good or bad that they've done, not an overall ranking of both. The original purpose of the first video was to show how relative each faction was to the Raider groups, not their morals overall. The NCR isn't ranked on the good they've done, just as the Children of Adam aren't completely ranked on the bad. Due to this, I will keep this scale up tentatively, and I plan on doing a revision of the factions as a whole in an upcoming video, all ranked under the same categories to give us a true, accurate scale. I hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in joining our community, why not join our Discord through the link below? We discuss things like Fallout, Destiny 2, Warframe, and much more. We would be absolutely delighted to have you hang out. Thank you all again for the support you've been showing my content. The constant outpouring of support and care you've shown me has revived my dream of making content, and I can't express how thankful I am. With that being said, remember to tell your mom you love her. 6 is out.